Wow, did I ever get slammed this weekend on programming projects and family stuff, and wow, it was busy, and it's just keeps on going. So today I was just like juggling Zoom calls and wrapping up programming this, wrapping up programming this. So finally today later I'm going to put out a video on the Quant Tower launch that is commencing. I just talked to the programmer earlier on what's going to go in the initial launch package out of what's been built so far and get that rocket launched. But getting lots of questions on the bands, so let's talk about the bands and a bit of selling today and a little nice ping pong back and forth. I like this little dip right here and lift. That was a nice little long setup because we had a W pattern leading up to the lift. Stop never more than most recent price pivot, entering this area, come up, trade, and get a nice push through mid-band, stop to break even plus, churned a bit, and then we got a nice little push there right at the late part of the day. Rarely do I get in trades late, but I like that little push we had right there. I thought maybe we were going to come right up to here. I didn't think we'd push up that high, but you never know. They've been doing it. And then earlier in the day, we had another W pattern in here and lift. I was already kind of busy doing other things. I didn't hit it. And I did like this rotation here. We had a push. We had a little bit higher push. So I was thinking they might, try to come back up and backfill some of the selling. And it failed. And it came down and made a lower pivot that some of the prior pivots. And it came up and made a lower pivot high. So the main bands were down. We had a lower pivot high. So I did hit that one. And I had no problem getting daily gold today because I was already short from the overnight session. Made a nice hit there. But I thought then we would go down at a minimum and at least challenge this pivot low. Came down, bounce, and then finally we got the push through and I blipped out. And so anyhow, I thought today was fairly easy. It was a little bit grindy at times. So the down move, took effort. But yeah, we had W pattern and lift there. Nice tight W pattern and lift there. And so overall, pretty decent day. At least we got some volatility, got a little bit of selling. It's better than just watching it grind up all day long, day after day after day. And then right at the end, institutionals came in when nobody will really oppose them and kind of repark the market higher, trying to negate most of the sell off as the market gets ready to go into the after hour session. But what I was going to say in the bands, getting some really good questions on the bands, so let's talk about that real quick. So the bands are a hybrid indicator. They're not like old. This is nothing like the way you would use math to compute a Bollinger Band or a Keltner channel. That stuff's it lags. It's not responsive to price. It's old school math, old school programming. Because it's not that sophisticated, it doesn't take that difficult of programming. This is different. So we're using some of the code and some of the way that we compute the formula to create the plot of the bands, whether it's the main bands or the fast bands. Part of that needs live market data, that unending flow of tick by tick data for the full computational side of the code to look at price, plot the bands, and then lock it down segment by segment. So these are non-recalculating, no repaint bands. So right here's the organic bar that's still in plot. Notice there's not a line segment, and there won't be. All these prior line segments are fixed plot. They'll never move. Once a segment plots from the close of one bar to the close of another, that locks in place. So when that segment plots, it locks. It never moves again. When this bar closes, the next segment plots. When this bar finally closes, and then the next bar starts and starts ticking away, then that next thing will plot and lock. So these are non-recalculating, no repaint bands in the iGrid Pack 2. So the formula or the math or whatever you want to call it to operate this indicator and make it so responsive to price and so effective has to have live market data to utilize the entire capability of what the code is looking at to plot the fast bands and the main bands. So that's different than if I just suddenly turn on the chart and then backfill all the prior activity with historical data where bar by bar, that's not then going through the formula or through the math and computing the bands the way they do live. So what I do if I want to like back test something, so right now, if I shut off the feed and turn it back on, then some of this prior plot that happened live and was fixed, did not repaint in any way, shape, or form, will alter a bit because now all the indicators all getting filled with backfill data, but not using the full, uh, calculation of how we're plotting the bands that we need live tick data. And in the end, it's pretty simple. I mean, we're all trading on the hard right edge of the chart and we're trading on live data. Nobody's trading, we're trading futures on the hard right edge. We're not trading histories like, oh, I'm going to go back and trade back here again. Well, that's not how it works. So I built these bands so you can watch them on the hard right edge and make trading decisions. And we'll give you some markers that'll give you heads up that you're getting some reversal candles starting to pop as a heads up. We'll give you cross signal markers when the fast bands get a full cross of the mains band closing back inside, whether it's top to, fast bands coming back in the bands from the top side or fast bands coming back in the main bands from the bottom side. You can toggle those on or off. You can change the color of them, the thickness, can turn on audible alerts, no audible alerts. They're outputs that can be used with third-party tools. The triangles are outputs that can be used with third-party tools. The exact line segment of the mid-band and the fast bands, all that's outputs that can be tied to third-party tools. So if I want to, like, let's say I want to go in and play around with the optimization feature we added, where you say, okay, I want a little bit more excursions outside my bands to take advantage of during the day to give myself good, solid trade opportunity, as many as possible, but ones that have a super high probability of mean reversion. So I might say, okay, I want 12% of all candlesticks to be outside of the main bands. I hit that. I hit OK. Now it'll go do a little optimization and it spits it out and it says, okay, I've just adjusted the width of your main bands. I've set it to 2.5 width for the deviation, and that will let you see 11 point some percent. So I'm like, okay, well, I really want 12%. So I'm going to drop this down to 2.4. And now I'm dialed in and I have the bands where I want it. So at 2.5, I get 11.92% of all candlesticks traded are outside of the main bands, either on the upper or lower side. And then 88% of the rest of the candlesticks are in the bands. So that's actually a really important number, and traders are going to find out why this is so important the more they work with me on these bands, because there's certain percentages that are really nice sweet spots that you can just go instrument by instrument, time frame by time frame, and put in a certain range, and you'll be dialed in every time. You won't need to do a whole bunch of optimization work. On FX, if you can be like between 7 and 10%, you're like right there in the sweet spot. On crypto, you might want to go 3 to 5, not 3 to 5%, probably like 5 to 7%, because those make such big moves. You want to make sure that you're grabbing the last little bit of the excursion before the mean reversion. Now, we don't just use the bands for mean reversion trading outside in, pressing outside the dynamic range, coming back to the mean. Pressing outside the dynamic range, coming back to the mean. Outside the range, back to the mean. Outside the range, back to the mean. Outside the range, back. That's not the only way. We can use trend following, where we get pullbacks. Main bands are up. We get some sort of pullback below the mid band of the main bands, and we get a hook in the fast bands, and we engage that. So there's trades. Here's hooks in the downtrend. These are full tilt mean reversion events. We're getting extreme pushes outside of the dynamic range and so on. So there's actually a lot of ways that I teach to use the bands other than just the mean reversion events. Okay, so I'm going to go back in my bands and I'm going to set them to about a 2.6 for now. And I'll recalibrate that. So we have that optimization feature in there. But so what I do, if I really want to see what it would look like during a trade week, it's real simple. I just go into NT8, I go into the playback feature, I go to historical data, I go back maybe 2 weeks of historical data, and then I just turn it on and run it forward. And after 2 weeks, it's real easy. Oh, my excursions outside the main bands are too significant. Okay, I need to widen these bands up a bit. I see some problems where I get in moves where, there might be 1 or 2 partial pullbacks before the third one finally gave me the big mean reversion event. Whatever, if there's a big hard trend. So whatever you then see in replay data and get your charts dialed in, that settings, then you can go off and use those live. And then you can adjust from there. You can make incremental adjustments from there live. But I find out that once I get on a certain settings for a certain instrument and bar time, I just don't change it. It just keeps working. Like today, even though it was range bound, I made money off the short, but if I would have taken any trade the entire day, any of the other signals, I would have at least gotten trade to mid band where I can go to break even plus, so I would have had a free trade on. So in none of the signals did I ever have the market, suddenly run against me hard. And I don't risk much either. So let's say I see a W pattern and lift, and I get a cross signal. Well, my stop's just below most recent price pivot. We get up to mid band, my stop goes to break even plus, and it did make a full excursion the other side. Okay, I'm done. So I made a little over 2 to 1 on that one. Trade like this, you get in. There was a W pattern. And wherever your entry point would be and your stop, never more than most recent price pivot, get to med band plus, you move your stop to break even plus. That is that's like 2 to 1, 3 to 1, 4 to 1. You're pushing 4 to 1 plus before we finally started getting some heads up downward triangles saying, hey, we're outside of the main bands and we're getting some mean reversion candles, some candles that are closing to the downside. You might want to think about exiting your trade, and plus it's the end of the day. So in the end, I use replay data to help me optimize. But with the big Quant Tower launch video that I'll be posting up tonight, Quant Tower is going to end up giving us amazing optimization data that will translate back to NT8 users also, because we're going to be pretty much on the same bar types. So just to summarize, this is a hybrid indicator. I'm not using old school stuff that everybody's already looked at and they can only get a small edge, if any, out of it. This is indicators that are built to be very responsive to price and that auto adapt to rapid changes in volatility. So I can use them in live tick data. They're fantastic. And I can use replay historical data to dial in